Hello, this is your official introduction to the Neutral Labs Luna. So what is Luna? Luna is basically a groovebox, one that is grooved by patching. It has 5 oscillators, which are always square waves, and it has 3 low-pass gates with volume control, an EQ tilt from bassy to high, a release control. We can plug external sources or the oscillators into these low-pass gates, and we can trigger them with these sockets. We have a little effects block that has 2 different effects that we can load up in an A and a B block, and we can choose what these things are. And all this stuff in the middle, these patch points, are things that we can use to combine signals and make different kind of signals with them. If you're combining things very slowly with the logic operators, then you're basically making interesting triggers. And then if you just do exactly the same thing, but you do it at audio rates, then you're making tones. And we can use those rhythms to trigger the low-pass gates, and we can use the tones to go into the low-pass gates. For the avoidance of doubt, what a low-pass gate is a kind of filter. These are not true low-pass gates as one may know them. They're not made with Vactrols or other ROHS-incompliant components. It's done in the analog realm, but with other methods. And the other orientation thing to point out is this little screen. And this screen is sort of intentionally small and even turns itself off if you don't mess with it for a while. And the idea of the screen is that you just come in here occasionally to set the Luna up, program the sequences that are in the sequencer, because there's an up to 64-step sequencer in each of the top 2 oscillators. And then you can also program how the thing responds. But this is stuff that you don't do all the time necessarily. You come in here, you do some setup, you choose how things are, and then you go back out and you just play with the machine as it is. And you might well ask, what's this for? What is this good for? This is a Lunetta style synthesizer, so named after a guy, Stanley Lunetta, who made these CMOS-based homebrew synthesizers that use square waves and basically mush them together in really interesting ways. And that's kind of what we have a little flavor of here. But the idea is we're going to mash square waves together, and we're going to make grooves with this thing, rhythms and beats and things that are certainly not an 808, but are kind of groovy. It is both a desktop module and it's also a eurorack module too. And I hope that you're curious, even if you don't quite understand why this might be useful. I don't actually think you need to understand quite why. All you really need to know in order to experiment with this thing is know that the sockets that have gold around them are outputs, and the sockets that don't are inputs. We plug outputs to inputs, and then eventually we route them into the inputs of the low-pass gates, trigger them, and see what happens. So let's make our first patch. So our first patch is easily made. We just push the little pads. By default, these 3 little gold pads trigger the 3 low-pass gates. And if I turn up the release time, they become longer. If I change the tilt control, we hear how they become bright and dull. And so it's like a one knob EQ. Volume is volume. And these little trigger knobs are basically adding a sustain portion. I push them and I get a little click, but if I switch this up, I get a sustain. And now I'm using the pad to trigger this, but I want to mention here, you can also use MIDI. Dig into the manual where you will find a lot more information. It's very nicely written. It tells you more about the sort of deeper stuff that you can do. Maybe I want this thing to kind of drone. I can do this if I activate the little screen. And the little screen works in a kind of, it has its own little quirky way. You hold down this button to switch between effect editing and to here to sort of menu editing. We hold it down and now we're in effect editing and I can affect slot A or slot B because you can have two effects. A goes into B. So I could have drive, but I might want to go through, let's have a little flip through this, filters and delays and reverbs. And if I come out here, the effects are kind of nuts. We can also adjust the wet and dry of the A or the B section, by the way. The effects are very characterful and quite weird. The drive is absolutely honkingly crazy. We'll try that in a little bit. Anyway, I wanted to come in here because I'm going to go into this other menu and change how low pass gate 1 is being addressed. It's saying, hey bub, you're in pad mode where the pad triggers me. And I can cycle through all these other things that can trigger it. MIDI clock can trigger it. The sequences can trigger it. But what I just want is drone to trigger it. Now this is just open. And so for the 5 oscillators, the top 2 are kind of sequencer and CV addressed, but these bottom 3 are kind of simpler. They have a low, mid and high speed rate control here. And if I turn this up, you can hear that in action. And then you can adjust the pitch frequency with that. And so let's make a more complicated tone. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take oscillator 3 and I'm going to go into the XOR. Then I'm going to go to oscillator 4 and go into the other part of XOR. And then remembering that the gold colored rings are outputs, then that's the output. And that is the input to low pass gate 1. Now when I turn this up, much more complex tone than just a single square wave, right? And that's because we're XORing them, as you do. I'm often XORing. What XOR actually is doing is it's a logic operation where if one of the oscillators happens to be up, then it comes out of the output, and if the other one happens to be up, then it comes out of the output, but only when one of them is up. If they're both up, it doesn't come out. If they're both down, it doesn't come out. So they sort of take turns individually. And because they overlap with each other, they're not perfectly in sync with each other, are they? So that means that they are overlapping and they are both high at certain times. And this is creating a kind of weird sort of pulse width modulation effect because they're not in perfect lockstep. And you really can get, like, PWM. Nick-pleasing PWM. So good for those difficult drone projects that I know you're planning. So then what? Well, so then we have all these other oscillators free. And we might like to use the 5th oscillator as a clock. And so we have these other things. Bin, a binary counter. Ring, a ring counter. SR, a shift register. And mux, a multiplexer, of course. And so the binary counter is hopefully quite easy to explain. If we listen to this third oscillator, it's that. Okay? Now let's take it and not listen to it, but we'll plug it into the binary counter. And if we have sight, we may see a binary counter is a clock divider. This is dividing by 2, by 4, by 8, and by 16. And so in effect, this is a sub-octave generator, but I don't quite want to work that way. I want to make some rhythms. And so let's use the ring counter. This is a 5-step winking little thing. And so this ring counter literally just goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 from the outputs one after the other. And it also has a reset. And actually so does the binary counter too. And so if we were to take the output of this, and let's for fun, let's take the 5th output and we'll plug it into this LPG input here. But before I do that, I'll quickly come into the menu and change the low pass gate to pad so that it doesn't drone. When I turn this up, now what's happening is my low pass gate is being fired by the 5th socket on the ring counter. So I can make my weird John Carpenter impression. Always a good time. So what I could do is I could go plug into this first output, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take one of the outputs, and let's pick this one that's just after the 3rd one along, and we'll plug into the reset. What I did is I just shortened the sequence because I've self-patched it, so it's gone back into the reset, and so it's going to trigger much more quickly. And the effect will be much more obvious when we have something else to play it against. So I'm going to take a copy of this clock and go into the binary counter. And I'm going to take one of the outputs and I'm going to go into this low pass gate. And then I'm going to take the last output and go into this low pass gate. Now we've got a kind of crackly sound in this 3rd one because it's just hearing the clock actually that we're generating. And so what I'll do is I'm going to take copies of our oscillators here and I'm going to go into the mux. And the mux has got 2 halves, an S side and a D side. And I'm going to plug one into the S0 and I'm going to plug one into D0 now, I think. And let's come on the output and let's go in here. Then of course we've got 2 other oscillators that are free. 1 and 2 here. And let's take them and let's XOR them as well. Make something more complicated. And then we'll take the XOR'd output and let's feed it into this middle low pass gate. Let's find the signal that's triggering it. It's this one. And now in a synth like this, we don't reprogram the rhythm by changing, the XOX pattern. We reprogram by repatching. So we just try a different output. Until we like what we hear. And then we use tilt to muffle things down, kind of mix with just one knob, make things bassier or bright and sharp. do sort of very primitive techno drops. So this is the sort of basic principle. We smash together oscillators in weird ways. We slow things down at the same time using the same oscillators to make rhythms that trigger the low-pass gates using the weird oscillators and using those weird rhythms all together to create this kind of odd, interconnected little family. Let's do some sequencing. And so the way that we do this is that we have to go into this little menu, we hold down the button and push here, and then in this sort of secondary menu that's separate to the effects one, we have the ability to change all kinds of things about how the oscillators get triggered, i.e. the CV inputs here, what they do, the scale and root note of the sequence, and the sequences themselves. What I would do is I go into RSeq1 there, and you see in the corner, if you have sight, it says 1. I can twiddle the dial and choose different notes. And I can then page through the sequence and just choose different notes. If I hold this down, though, I get a number, 5. And I'm able to then turn this down or up to 64. And this is how we can have sequences of up to 64 steps. So I might like to pretend I've got a boucle and have 5, or maybe I'll be old traditional and have a 16-step one. And to hear this, we know we need to plug into the mixer, but if I touch the pad, we're not hearing anything. And we need to change it to sequencer. So the sequencer will be the thing that is advanced when we send a clock into this. And then what I do is I take the 5th output and plug it into here. And then we've got a kind of traditional groovebox here, right? Traditional groovebox, yes indeed. We can then apply effects to our weird little sequence. And then to change the sequence, we go back into the edit and I wiggle the dial, change it, wiggle, change, wiggle, check and wiggle. You can kind of just go through it at a breakneck pace like this and then run. There we've got a completely different sequence to play with. And now, by the way, this is being constrained to a scale. There are a bunch of scales inside. Oh yeah. That you can choose. And also, if I was to go into the menu and edit the sequence now, you hear the note live as you're editing it. So if you want to preview it, you can. I've got a second sequence. Can I have 2 sequences going at the same time? And the answer is yes, of course. Yes, you can. So now, low pass gate 2 is being triggered every time a gate comes into CV2. And then let's take the output of the sequence. And then by plugging that in, we've plugged the output of the second oscillator into the second low pass gate. And so we hear a 2-part sequence. We have 2 completely independent sequences noodling along. And then what I might do is plug this clock output into the binary counter and clock that sequencer a little bit more differently. Then let's disconnect that, the main clock. Now both the sequences are being clocked by the binary counter. XOR them together, which should make something fairly nuts sounding. And then feed that into the third remaining low pass gate. And then trigger that gate with the binary counter as well. We start to get kind of metallic tings and dings. Come in here and let's change the sequence and let's just go completely hog wild. Nice. Indeed. That's cool, isn't it? It's nice. My finger's advancing the sequence. Yeah, mate. Oh, yeah. That's ace. What? We have the internal sequencer running. A little bit of a groove going on with some other bits and bobs wired in. There's a little bit of high pass filter there. Ugh. This is the inbuilt crush effect, and I'm adding a little bit of post reverb there with a UA pedal that I have. Of course, there's reverb built in, so let's try that. We have 2 blocks, so I will reverb, and then we'll get it to work. Let's reverb. Just keep trying stuff. Oh, yeah. Oh, that's nice. You know, once you have a sequence in the sequencer, then it's all about kind of triggering it in different ways. That is to say, advancing the sequence at different rates to kind of slow and speed it up. And then also low-pass gating it. In different ways to chop it up. There's quite a lot of ways that we can groove a riff. And we can just create these kind of weird little three-part multi-timbral grooves. It's a groovebox, I think. Isn't it? I don't know. I don't know what it is. Fruity. I'd like to talk a little bit about just some ideas of how to use Logic modules to make rhythms, because I don't think that's something that's taught in school. And it's just really not obvious, is it? I mean, how can it be? So let's just try some stuff. So we've got three little sounds, and one thing to say is that if you were using these three oscillators for audio rate tones, and go straight into the binary counter, and because the binary counter is a clock divider, then it will give you, from an audio rate signal, you might be able to get a clock out and still use that at audio rates. So that's what this lets us do. The 8th output, sorry, this is the divide by 16. So we get a kind of functional clock. And you can then just go straight into the low pass gate input to sort of regularly trigger. Pretty simple as it gets. But then if we take that same signal and we go into not, then when this is high, that's low. And when that's low, that will be high. So you're creating, it's a way of creating alternating signals, but from one signal. We don't have to create two triggers to do it. We're just sending the high through a thing that turns high into low. And that creates the opposite. And if you use that opposite thing to trigger something else, then you get a... I'm doing that too fast. When one's high, the other's low. You get a kind of little... the functional equivalent of doing that. You get the kind of reggae offbeat. Then another one that I really like is a way of quantizing pads. I'm not very good at finger drumming, and so I struggle to hit a pad and have something happen at just the right moment. You know, so if I was to use the pad to trigger the middle low pass gate, I'm only so good at that. But if I take it and put it into an and then use this same signal, we're really stacking up the stacks here, friend. That's 3 high. Then what's interesting is this will only go high if both this clock is high and my little pad is high. And in effect, because the clock is only ever high on the beat, then it means that the output signal is only output on the beat. It's a really useful one because it's a way of quantizing taps to a beat. sometimes when I press it, it's not at the right moment to cause the trigger, but when the trigger occurs, it is only ever on a beat. Do you hear? So really useful little thing when we have pads here, right? It's a way of quantizing pads. That's something and can be used for. So then if we want to create kind of pseudo-random rhythms, how would we do that? Because these logic things are very logical. Well, we have a shift register in here. And so what we might like to do is we might like to take the clock and clock it. So I've got the binary counter and I feed a clock into the shift register to make the shift register work. And then I need to feed some data. There's a DAT input. And so what might be interesting to feed as data are the oscillators. And actually what would be nice would be to get the oscillators to sort of combine in weird ways. And so maybe what I might like to do is take the top two oscillators, 1 and 2, and let's stick them into XOR as well. Because we get this wonderful kind of harmonic meshing, which can phase and create weird patterns. And then we're going to feed that output into the data. And so what's happening is two audio rate signals, well, these are kind of slow, we could speed them up, but two signals are going to enmesh and do this weird sort of kind of PWM-y phasey type thing we were doing before. And that's happening audio rates, but the shift register is only advancing and capturing that data on the beat for us and advancing it on the beat. So we've got this kind of wild and spurious data going in, but we're only sampling it and moving it down on the beat. And this is what's serving to create kind of something much more sensible from something quite chaotic. Shift registers are really good like this. So if we disconnect this regular old friend here, I'll plug into this first one and go into the low pass gate. Notice how it triggers not regularly, but now and then, but always on the beat. Oh, let's switch up the sound. Oh, nice. Yeah, like that. So our little incidental shift register sound is kind of dramatic. Oh, nice. And so that little zack kind of back sound is the XOR'd oscillators 1 and 2, which originally and still we're actually using in our shift registers to create this kind of wild little pattern, which we're actually mushing together and we're sending into the data input of the shift register. And even though what's going in is this like wang kind of like audio rate signal, because the shift register is only being clocked at a slow rate by our binary counter, then even though a crazy audio rate thing is going in, you're getting a kind of nice or sensible thing out. And I could disconnect this little trigger and plug instead of using my pad, I could put one of my ands into that shift register output. I'm starting to make a kind of generative thing. And if I was to mess with these oscillators, we'll change the tone, and we'll definitely also change the sort of pattern that is being created. Although it's not necessarily a repeating pattern, because these things are not in sync. So they sort of phase in odd ways, and because they're sort of enmeshing in odd moments, then that just changes the thing you get when they are sampled by the shift register. When I say sampled, it's just whether it's high or low at that point. Again, nice kind of dubby, sort of slow dubby techno thing. Sense. I don't expect it to sort of immediately make sense, but I can tell you the system works. It can both make tones, and you can use those tones to also make rhythms with these weird little logic things. And with a little bit of experimentation, and no, not that socket, that one, no, not that one, that one, you can find little grooves in this odd box. Nice. Here we have an example of a little beat, a sort of groove made using the ring counter and the binary counter to trigger elements, and then we're using the multiplexer to smash together or multiplex the oscillator. Yeah, I think. Oh. No, the primary oscillator and the secondary oscillator. And we're modulating the second oscillator with the ring counter. A thing I often do, don't you? But we get this kind of appealing little rhythm. To which we can add comb filtering, Nice. And here, at the end of all things, I have a final example where I've racked, in a eurorack case, all three of the Neutral Labs machines. That is the Scrooge, which is a kind of fruity drum machine, and then the Elmira 2, which is a sort of fruity pad machine. And so here, the Scrooge is the master clock, And let me explain what I've set up here. What I have here is the Elmira doing a sort of wonderful 4-note, slow kind of progression, like a chord progression, although it's not a chord. And this is done by being triggered by the Luna. And what I have here are 4 gates being sequentially sent from the ring on Luna. And the ring is being clocked slowly by the bin, the clock divider. And so these are sending a gate every now and then, one, then the other, then the other, then the other. And through patch programming, I've wired it so that it goes this one, then this one, then that one. Because that's just how I tuned the notes, and it felt nice to create the progression in that way. We choose which notes play by wiring. And I can introduce more elements on the Scrooge. Yeah. And then to this I can add little grooves from the Luna. If I fade this up, what we hear is that I've got a couple of sequences in the sequencer. And I can sort of bring them into life by fading them up and increasing their releases. Adding reverb on my mixer. And I have delay in here. And I've come through and I've carefully chosen the sequence in each one. And by the way, when you're in the sequence selector, you can hear the note that you are choosing with the little knob. So it's quite easy to sort of tune it in context, create your little riff that you're happy with, where all the notes work with each other. I'm using various processes in the Luna to make these riffs and clocks that are triggering and firing things in a satisfactory way. Noteworthy is low pass gate 3. I'm using and a trigger from bin and an oscillator. This slow 5th oscillator goes into one bit of and then a steady clock goes into the other part of and. I say steady, it's steady but it's incidental. And so it means that we only hear low pass gate 3 when this and that are high. And by having two incidental things that are not quite playing at the same rates, then you get occasional triggers of this. this weird like da 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 is made with the mucks. There's so many different ways to mash and blend. And although this looks overwhelming, I just want you to understand that I just started with the Elmira and the Scrooge and just slowly added parts and looked to create rhythms, and I tried different things and I tried different sockets and I found, oh yeah, that feels nice, or that feels nice, I'd like this to happen, or I could do that. I have a spare effects block here in B. And we haven't tried drive. There are many effects, we've not heard most of them. And I just want to highlight drive because I think it's really nuts. Pulls out tones from this in a really kind of guitar ampy way. It's obviously not like that, but hopefully you know what I mean. Adding reverb afterwards. It just sounds really righteous on this, acting on these three little low pass gates. And then we have these poke inputs on the Scrooge, and all you need to know is if you poke them with triggers, then weird things happen, and Lord, we've got triggers here, haven't we? So let's poke it. Oh, wow. Wow. Oh, mate.